Hi everybody, welcome back to the Introduction to Climate Change course. In this lesson, we are going to shift away from talking about just the effects of climate change to talking about how we can actually prevent damage from those effects. So the key question at the center of today's lesson is, how can we change our cities and towns in order to limit the damage that climate change may cause? And in order to answer this question, we're going to go through an interactive activity. So I'm going to pose a problem from one of the effects of climate change that we've already discussed earlier in this course, and I'm going to give you a few seconds to pause the video and write down some ideas for solutions. Now, there's multiple solutions and to every problem, and you obviously don't need to get it right every time. But what we want to do is instead just start thinking about reacting to this problem and doing what we can to stop the damage, because this is going to be an extremely important question. Even if we stop global warming or the rising temperatures tomorrow, there's still going to be effects from the heating that has already happened. So being able to prevent damage is going to be very, very important in the future. Now, for our first example, let's do sea level rise. Well, what's the problem with sea level rise? Well, what happens is rising seas are going to flood and otherwise damage buildings or other infrastructure that did not used to be underwater, right? So things that were above sea level, and this is not good because it can damage houses, buildings, and cause a lot of and even put lives in danger if you're in a house while it's flooding. So now I'm going to give a few seconds for you to pause the video and write your own solution. So one solution to this would be a seawall. A seawall, which I drew a little two-dimensional example in the down there, is going to be it's an actual wall, and it's going to stop rising water from getting to shore. So if the sea level goes up 3 feet, for example, you can build a wall that's going to be 4 feet, and then that way you can kind of make sure that the water doesn't get there. The thing is that it's temporary, because eventually it's going to rise, and seawalls are going to be very, very expensive, especially if you're going to come back and keep adding another foot to it. Heat waves. So what's the problem with heat waves? Really hot temperatures are going to put a lot of people in danger because they're not used to it, and it's just really intense heat. So it's going to put lives in danger, especially elderly and people who are sick, because those are the people who are least able to deal with a lot of heat. So now take a few seconds to pause and brainstorm some solutions to this, thinking in a city or in a town that is hit by a heat wave. So hopefully you had some time to jot down your answer. One way to prevent damage from this, especially to lives, is going to be prepare some sort of system in an area that is hit by a heat wave in order to prepare better. So what does that mean? It would mean that you want to give people in that area a way to cool down. So maybe designated areas with air conditioning, and put up a lot of areas with shade where people can go to cool down during the day. And this is especially important if it's an area where you're not usually dealing with heat, right? Because people are not going to already have that shade or AC. So moving on to crop failures, extreme heat is going to make it a lot more likely for crops to die, and for some crops is going to be impossible for it to even grow. And this is going to lead to possible food shortages, and like we covered in a few lessons ago, those food shortages are then going to make food way more expensive and will have rippling effects across the rest of the world. So take a few seconds and write down your solution. Okay, great. So what we can do to deal with crop failures is, one, we can try designing new crops that can withstand heat, or harsh conditions, or will prevent against pests better. Anything that's going to resist changes from climate change. And two is going to be take normal crops and grow those crops in a very special facility that gives the perfect conditions. Even if the conditions outside might be too bad, within that facility or greenhouse, the conditions are perfect. The problem with that solution, though, is that it'd be very hard to put every single crop under a building, because that'd be a lot of money and a lot of time, and it's something that we don't really have. So next, infrastructure damage. Well, what's infrastructure? Infrastructure are buildings that help run systems such as neighborhoods, cities, or a whole country. And some examples of that are pipes, buildings like houses, roads, bridges. Infrastructure really just means buildings that are important for not just individuals, but also a whole group of people. And the problem with this is that extreme weather and natural disasters are going to really put these buildings through a test, and they're going to end up damaging a lot of them, either because it's weather that it can't withstand, or the storm, or it's just really big storms, or just over time they just erode away or flood, right? And this is going to happen everywhere, all around the world, because all around the world buildings are made for their specific region. So when you start changing the weather everywhere around the world, same with the buildings, they're not going to be able to deal with that change. Now take a few seconds to write down your solution, and what I think would be a good solution for this is to build new buildings or add new features to buildings that are going to make it withstand the changes better, right? So it's going to make them more weather resistant. It'll, depending on what region it is, it's going to make them more likely to withstand the natural disasters in that area. And even if you can't, you can't obviously replace every building in the country or in the world, but you can add those new features. So one example of this could be hurricanes that come in and they can take the roofs off houses. Well, one way to prevent that is hurricane windows, because hurricane windows can help withstand the impact from very severe storms. And you're not rebuilding a new house from the ground up, you're just adding a new feature to the building to make it more weather resistant. And this is going to protect a lot of property and a lot of lives in the long run. Now, if we want to move on to natural disasters, we've already talked about these a good amount, but the problem that we face from climate change is that natural disasters or extreme weather events are going to be a lot more common. And what this means is that their effects are going to be just multiplied all over the country, all over the world, because this will mean that there will be more hurricanes, more tornadoes, more droughts, more wildfires, more of everything, right? And this is not only going to cause a lot of damage to infrastructure, like we just were talking about, but it's also going to put many lives in danger. Now, I hope you can pause, and the solution is going to be, one solution is going to be to create new types of warning systems in order to alert people in an area that's going to be hit by a natural disaster ahead of time. And with that knowledge, they can either know to evacuate, or they can prepare, stock up food, board up their windows and everything like that. And this is important because when you have a bit of extra time, it really gives you more space to make good decisions that are important to saving your life or your property. Now, how else can we prevent damage? The key to this is going to be to stop emitting carbon dioxide. And that's because everything that we've been talking about today, although it's very important, it's just like a band-aid on this big problem, because we are not really getting at we're not really stopping the actual problem of climate change. Instead, we are just dealing with its effects. But if we want to really stop and get to the core of the problem, what we need to do is stop emitting carbon dioxide. And we're going to talk more about that in our next lesson. So I'll see you then.